Good afternoon, my name's Justin. Welcome to my channel. I play guitar on songs in Nashville. I've got my Tweed Deluxe here. It's a Lazy J20, and I want to talk about 3 things that you should be doing with your Tweed Deluxe. They apply even if you're not playing a Lazy J. So, first of all, I just have it cranked. This is not a complicated amp. You turn everything up. Here it is. Roll back the volume knob. Man, I love that sound. So you can hear that I've got a little bit of a slapback going on. That's in post. And what I mean by that is it's not going into the amp. It's not at my pedal board. It's a plug-in on the channel that I have the amp going into in Pro Tools. So it doesn't affect the front end of the amp, and the amount of distortion doesn't affect how the slapback sounds. I just have it set to one single loud slap. So here's how a cranked Tweed Deluxe sounds in a solo context. No pedals, just a little bit of slapback in post. Here we go. Very cool. It's just super dynamic, loads of sustain. So the way that the Lazy J works is that the channels, they're interactive. I can do things with the channel, the volume level of the channel I'm not plugged into, and it'll affect the one that I am plugged into. There's a lot of cool things you can do. Mine is a little strange. If the normal channel is all the way off, it's brighter. If the normal channel is up, it's a bit thicker in the lower mids. And then I've got it set to where the normal channel is at 10. It's not at 12 all the way up, but it's at 10. It's right before it starts to actually make things get quieter. From about 10 to 12, if you crank one channel and then you turn the volume all the way up at the other one, from about 10 to 12, it starts to get quieter. And it does something weird to the sound, which I think is really cool. But the way mine's set right now is tone is at 12, bright channel volume is at 12, and I'm plugged into bright 1. And then normal channel is at 10. Now if I turn the normal channel up, listen to this. It got quieter. That's with it back to about around 10 o'clock. Here's everything at 12. It still sounds really great. It's just got a little more of that sag, and it got a little quieter. It's subtle, but it's there. You can hear it. And the difference for me is that on this setting, I can get some really weird things with effects into the front end of the amp. So I'm going to turn off my slapback that's in post, okay? So this is thing number 2. Number 1, you should be cranking it. And just to pause and go back to that for a second, I know that if you crank a Tweed Deluxe and you have roommates, or if you live in an apartment, or if you have neighbors, it gets loud. I feel like we're all in these situations where we need to start taking advantage of the aux box, or it's like a 2 notes torpedo, you know, or buy something like a Rev D20. We need to have these sort of direct situations where we can control our master volume. That's really hard on a Tweed amp when you're just listening to the speaker in the room. I'm not listening to the speaker in the room. It's running to an extension cab. It's my Morgan in the garage. Speaker's an ET65, 12-inch, and it's an open back cab, and I have a Heil PR30 on it running into a Chandler TG2 into my Apollo straight into Pro Tools. After 9 o'clock, if I were doing this, it'd be through the aux box, and it would sound great. I use the aux box all the time. Or I'll plug into my Rev and just use that, and I'll use its cabinet simulation on the front. So anyway, back to the second thing you should be doing. When cranked, you should try running some effects into the front end of the amp. They can sound really cool and really weird. Like if I have everything on 12 like it is now, you can hear it's got a little more sag to it. It doesn't quite, it's not quite as big and full. It's like a choked, cranked sound. That's what I call it. It's a crank sound, but it's a little choked. So here's what a slapback sounds like into the front end of the amp with this. I need to turn the volume down a little bit on it. Really interesting. It's almost like a gate, you know? That's a reverb. That's a Boss Fender 63 Spring. So let's back the normal channel off. Did you hear the noise floor went up? That's at 12. That's at 10. 12. 10. Now the sound is, the tone is a lot more muscly. I'll turn that reverb off. Here's the beauty of being cranked. I can turn down, having the amp cranked, I can turn down on the guitar. Turn on some tremolo, you know? How about a longer reverb from the Maris Mercury 7? It's killer. Those effects work, even though the amp's cranked. It almost doesn't make any sense, you know? So if you like to play a gig and you want to have everything at your fingertips, and then maybe like a tremolo and a reverb, you know, say you have a Flint on the floor in front of you, headstock tuner, maybe a fuzz pedal for like ultra crazy saturated sounds. You just don't need much else, you know? I've literally gigged with just a fuzz pedal and some reverb, you know, and a reverb in front of a Tweed Deluxe. And what else do you need? I mean, you can go from dead clean, not dead clean, but just real sparkly clean, you know. That's the beauty of a Tweed Deluxe. It doesn't lose any of the like harmonic information around the note when you clean it up. Like this is, that's awesome. Neck pickup's still cranked. Down to 4 now. Now I think I've got them balanced pretty well. It sounds killer. So now what I want to do is turn off the effects into the front of the amp. And number 3, this is for all you players who just plug straight into it. That's great, and I think some of the biggest strengths of the amp are found there. When I take this to a session, and generally when I don't have cartage, I'm just taking the Lazy J. I'm just taking a combo amp. It's got a Alnico blue in it, you know, the Celestion 15-watt blue, and it took me a while to get used to how that speaker sounds. This is all I take. I take that in a small pedal board and several different guitars, and I can get everything I need out of it. And I'll show you what my settings are. This is number 3. My settings for running a pedal board into the front end of a Tweed amp, which it can do gloriously as well, okay? All right, I just changed the settings. My settings for my Lazy J when I'm on a session using a pedal board into the front of it are the tone knob is between 7 and 8. That's about 2 o'clock, you know, on a Tweed Deluxe. Remember, it goes from 0 to 12. So when I say between 7 and 8, I don't mean on a clock face. And then the bright channel, I generally use the bright channel. I just feel like it pokes through a mix a little bit more without sounding thin at all. The normal channel's awesome too, don't get me wrong. And sometimes when I pick up a much brighter guitar like a Tele or a Strat, I'll switch to the normal channel. So I'm in bright 1, tone is at 7 to 8, my bright volume is at 3 or maybe a hair above or below, just depending on the room. And then my normal channel volume, I keep that pretty high just to add some low mids to the bright channel, okay? So this is what that sounds like. You notice I've got the guitar volume all the way up. With the guitar volume up, we've got that same sort of chimey, but there's fatness around the note, you know, all this harmonic stuff going on. It's like it was when I had the amp cranked and the volume turned down on the guitar. It's just not quite as sparkly. There's something that happens with a good Tweed amp and like a P90 guitar or a good, just any, man, I can get it on humbuckers too. A good guitar into a good cranked Tweed amp, you can actually get more sparkle. It's almost like a germanium fuzz, you know, it gets brighter when you clean it up in a cool way. So here, it's not quite as jangly and bright. It's a little midier, right? A little more mid-range. So I'm gonna play the same solo and show you what I do into the front of the amp. I'll probably just use the same slapback. Now that the amp isn't cranked, I need to turn its mix up to hear it. And let's just turn on the old cranked overdrive boost, see what happens here. again, it just sounds great. It's just killer, you know? The throwback is a great pedal, but it melds really well with this amp. I feel like that's similar to how the crank amp sounded. You know, it's not quite the same, but it's close. And I had to back the bass knob of the throwback off. I had to back it down. When there's too much bass on the throwback into a Tweed amp, it's a little much. So I think those are the three things, you know. If you have something that's different, that's like, you've got to try this, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear it. But you should be cranking your Tweed Deluxe and working the volume knob. I think most people do that. You should be turning it down at the volume knob and running effects into the front end of it because they sound great. You don't have the same problems of going into the front end of that amp as you do others. And then number 3, my settings for a good pedal platform. If you want to run a board into the front end of it and get a bunch of different sounds, try that. Try tone at 7 to 8 and bright volume at 3, and then the normal volume up at around 9 or so. Thanks for watching. I will see you guys later.